Welcome to today's edition of Daytime Dialogues. It's my great pleasure today to welcome one of the key movers and shakers in the American Zionist scene, Herb Block. Herb has been the executive director of the American Zionist movement since March of 2017, came from a long background in service to the Jewish community and also in the political world, having started his time as a special assistant to the Manhattan Borough President, David Dinkins, who then became the mayor of New York, the first African-American mayor, where also he then became the assistant to the mayor of the city of New York. And so we have a broad range of experiences that Herb has brought to the field. I appreciate you giving us the time, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Rabbi Matanki, and it's good to see you on screen. It was good to see you last week in Chicago. I'll talk a little bit about our events together.
Fantastic. But let me start from the simple and most basic point. I'm often asked, the Zionist movement, it was critical 125 years ago when Herzl started it and until the founding of the State of Israel. Then there were years where Israel really needed tremendous support from America and other allies. Today, Israel, thank God, is a very successful world power. What does the Zionist movement do today?
So I think that Herzl's vision was that the Zionist movement was not just about the founding of the state. That was obviously the key moment, and Herzl and Basel, said in 5 years, if not in 50 years, I founded the Jewish state. Came true 50 years later when the UN resolution that was just adopted, and that we just celebrated the 75th anniversary last week, and now coming up with Israel's 75th anniversary. So the 1948 was a key moment for the Zionist movement, but it was not only that. Herzl's vision was that the Zionist movement would connect the worldwide Jewish community to Israel and would also help develop the state of Israel, which even as the state of Israel is an amazing place and a high-tech nation and a home to millions of Jews, Herzl had a vision of the Chevra Mofet, the exemplary state, a country that is always in need of perfection and achieving more. So the Zionist movement, as I see it, is continuing Herzl's legacy. The platform that he announced, what was called the Basel platform, now called the Tochnit Yerushalayim, the Jerusalem program, is relevant in terms of bringing together Jews around the world, supporting the connection with Israel, helping to improve the state of Israel as it develops. This weekend, I was at a conference in California called Zionism 3.0, the Z3 conference, which is a gathering every year of a Zionists from around the country, especially on the West Coast. And they talked about the phases that you mentioned. Until 1948, founding the state, then the many years of getting the state launched, and now in the 21st century, continuing the connection and building the state. Herzl didn't probably envision that nearly half the world's Jews would live in Israel. In America, we have the largest center. Some people talk about the days when there was, the great centers were Israel and Bavel, and now it's really Israel and America. And so there's a role for the Zionist movement to continue to connect American Jews with Israel and with our brethren around the world through Israel.
So AZM is actually an umbrella organization of all the various Zionist organizations around the country, from, I don't want to say which end to which end, but from both ends of the spectrum and everything in between. In that role, you're somewhat of a peacemaker, is my assumption, because I know between the Mizrahi position, let's say, and the Likud position, even though there may be a lot of things we agree on, they'll have to take different positions, or within other groups of the Zionist movement. So how do you keep that balance going?
So as you mentioned, and for your viewers and listeners today, AZM is a coalition. We're a convening body of 41 now 41 national Jewish organizations, very diverse across the whole spectrum, politically, religiously, all the religious streams, youth movements, women's organizations, educational groups, advocacy groups, etc. We are both an independent body that gathers together, a place where all the Zionist groups in America can have a place to convene and speak to each other. We're also connected with as the American arm of the WZO, the Zionist Federation in the United States, affiliated with WZO. So to your question, we as the Jewish people have, since the time of the Torah, been a quarrelsome group, but in many ways that's our strength. We have Jews have a lot of diversity and a lot of different ways that we express our Judaism, our Zionism, but people are very passionate about it, and they care about it. Sometimes we get caught up in that passion, but we in AZM are a place where groups can come together, get to know each other a little bit better, share programming, be a central hub for Zionist resources, do programs that promote Zionism. There's Zionism itself is still under attack, increasingly under attack. There's a growing awareness that much of anti-Zionism these days is anti-Semitism. And while we don't want to just defend Zionism, we want to publicly promote Zionism as the national movement of the Jewish people for our homeland, and to unify the Jewish people with the state of Israel. We still have to explain and defend, and as President Herzog said in Basel at the gathering this summer for the 125th anniversary of the Zionist movement, we have to reclaim Zionism, and to use his words. And AZM is a place where even among all our differences and diversity, everybody is a Zionist, have different views of Zionism, but put together, that mosaic of views represents the strength of Zionism. And while we can't agree on a lot of positions among all the organizations, we can help explain why the Zionist movement is important and still relevant today.
But if we look at the studies of American Jewry, it seems to be that Zionism, this pride and connection with Israel, is waning, especially among younger American Jews. Would you say that that both in terms of the constituents of AZM and AZM in general, that it's an older organization, people middle age and up, more than the younger?
There are yes and no.
Perfect answer.
Of our 41 member organizations, a quarter of them are Zionist youth organizations and movements that a range of different streams and ideologies, and a growing number of campus organizations. So while the leadership of many Jewish organizations tend to be in the older demographic, there's a lot more people getting involved and a lot more younger people. There have been several organizations formed within the last 5 years, decade or so, to promote Zionism among youth on college campuses. Picking on the words of President Herzog, by reclaiming Zionism, unfortunately, Zionism has been under attack for a long time, and maybe it was a collective Jewish failure that while building the state, we let the word Zionism be captured by others, and we collectively need to fight back against that. Among younger people, it is a challenge, especially among on college campuses anecdotally, but there's also a lot of activity happening from many different organizations on college campuses, working with students and promoting Israel and Zionism. And sometimes from the attacks and critique comes more activism as a result, and more engagement. And then, projects like Birthright and others that didn't exist at the beginning of the state are now connecting young people with the Zionist movement. So it's for the Zionist Congress, for example, which will be held in April 2023, a quarter of all the delegates have to be young people under 35. So that's a way of engaging young people and requiring that we reach out, and every organization, no matter what their views, reach out and include young people in their activities.
So if I were looking at the AZM activities, and not necessarily for the AZM, but the constituent members of AZM, would more of their activities be focused on raising awareness of the importance of Zionism in the United States, in America, or would more of it being trying to represent the viewpoint of American Zionist organizations to Israel? Where's the balance?
I think it's both, as you very well stated. There's a lot of been in the media recently around this Israeli election, around the upcoming anniversary of Israel's 75 years, about the connection between diaspora Jewry and the state of Israel. Obviously, here in the AZM and in the United States, we care particularly about what's going on in the United States and making sure that officials in Israel and policymakers and the general public in Israel understand diaspora Jewry and understand American Jewry. So it is a combination of making sure that the voices and the viewpoints of the diaspora Jewish community, the American Jewish community, are understood within the government, within the national institutions of Israel, the WZO, the Jewish Agency, the Karen Kayemet Jewish National Fund, as well as promoting Israel and Zionism in America. Many of our organizations also support healthcare, humanitarian projects, gap year programs, and other things in Israel. So they're both working here with American Jews and doing things on the ground in Israel. So it's a mixture of action and representation.
So you and I were in a meeting last week with Yaakov Chagoel, who's the chairman of the executive of the World Zionist Organization, as I like to say, the person who sits in Herzl's seat, even though it's in a country that didn't exist when Herzl sat in that chair. And one of the things that he made a comment, and which I've heard before, and he said that it was a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but it was direct, and that is that the liberal movements, for example, within American Jewry, which may not be represented in Israel, and especially now with the change in government, is not represented within the government, that if they really want to effectuate change, move and add your voices to the voices of the citizens of the state of Israel. Do you find that kind of approach common? I understand it. I actually believe it. But it would really create a major challenge for American organizations who promote Zionism if the real voice is going to be reserved for the people who live there.
I mean, so there is the Aliyah is a core part of the Zionist ideology, the Zionist movement. Many people are Zionists who live in America. You and I among them right now. Maybe one day we'll be zocha, we'll be honored, privileged to live in the state of Israel. But many of us have connections of our family. I have 2 sons in Israel right now. One's in Oleh, one's studying there. I have extended family. We all have those connections. So we obviously as Zionists hope that people will move to Israel, will have that formal connection. But there are other ways that people can express their views. Israel, there were a lot of discussions by the diaspora ministry and the Knesset over the years of how to represent the views of the diaspora. And the Zionist election, for example, which happens every 5 years, which AZM runs, the U.S. election for the World Zionist Congress, is a grassroots way in which people can participate. Our slogan was, about voting for your voice in Israel in the last elections in 2020, and 125,000 American Jews participated in that election, double the number that had participated 5 years before, which showed to me, with more parties and groups running, which showed to me an increased interest in Zionism. And the World Zionist Congress is the parliament, the global parliament of the Jewish people. It's a body in which representatives from almost 40 countries gather, and it gives American Jewry and Jews from dozens of other countries around the world a platform in which to be represented through what's the national institutions, the Mosdot Lumim, the Jewish Agency, KKL, as I mentioned, the WZO, which is the parent body of all that. So while we share Yaakov's vision that Aliyah it should be a primary part of the Zionist movement. Until that happens, there are other ways that American Jewry can try to be heard, and we hope that people in Israel will, and especially officials and policymakers, will understand the diaspora in a way that will incorporate our views and the opinions, as diverse as they are, because the people in the diaspora, people in America, we're all potential citizens of Israel. We're all potential future Olim. And we, care deeply about what goes on in that country. We follow the elections. People pay attention to what's happening in Israel and care deeply about it.
Do you see in the American Jewish community diverging philosophically, ideologically from the Israeli political leadership? In other words, Netanyahu's government, which will be much further to the right than previous governments. And sometimes I have a feeling that American Jewry is moving much more to the left. Or is it just that those voices happen to be louder in each of their countries?
I think that, look, we did a webinar, we did a program, a watch party, Israel election watch party in Washington on November 1st with I-24 News, and people were gathered to watch the results. And we talked about some of these same things I just said about why we care about the elections. A week later, there were elections in America. Both countries, as we know from the results, are deeply split, whether it's now the incoming Netanyahu government or the Bennett government. And what we can see in Congress, we have a House and Senate that are virtually split, by a couple of seats. Either way, Israel is much the same. There are splits in ideology and voting in both countries, and the voices. When one government's in power in Israel, some American voices will be louder, and some will be, more supportive, and some will be more critical, and the same will be maybe flip around when the next government is in place. I think that America, I'm not going to get into American Jewish voting patterns. They've been, roughly, the same over time, maybe shifting a little bit over decades. American Jewry may be perceived to be more liberal overall than in Israel, based on American voting patterns. But that's, it's hard to translate American politics to Israeli views. I think that American Jews care deeply about Israel, and that's why a lot of people get worked up about what's going on when either side, quote unquote, in Israel is in power.
Now, you've been doing this role for almost 6 years. What, if you had to point to one or two highlights over those years, like the thrill of really either making a program amazing or being part of an amazing program, what would those one or two times have been?
So there were a couple, thinking offhand, the first year I came in, we called it the year of Zionist anniversaries. And it was a year when we celebrated the 70th anniversary of the UN partition. We kicked off a big event. A highlight of the year was a big conference to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the Balfour Declaration. And these anniversaries, while they may seem like, legacy events or heritage, they're important. In order to move forward, we have to also remember where we came from and how much was accomplished as an inspiration for moving forward. So we celebrated, a highlight of that was the Balfour anniversary and the centennial of that year as in showing an important moment in the Zionist movement. And then the World Zionist Congress elections, which we spent a lot of time working on and trying to engage American Jews in this grassroots representation effort, was a highlight because we, reversed the trend of several decades of fewer Jews participating in this election. And we had record numbers of people participating. Just coincidentally, literally the week before the COVID pandemic really struck America. So it was a moment that was very important for us to show the vitality and the continuing relevance of the Zionist movement with those 125,000 Jews participating. And then I would say now in this year, as have been moving out of the pandemic period, we've had an opportunity to celebrate 125 years of Zionism. There was a big gathering this summer in Basel. We've had other gatherings in the country, such as what we had last week in Chicago, in which you and others participated to celebrate that occasion and mark it in a city that had among the earliest Zionists in America were from Chicago. And now leading into Israel's 75th anniversary year, where we can, celebrate what's been accomplished. French people celebrate Bastille Day. Americans, we celebrate the 4th of July. Those are not days that you celebrate only based on who's sitting in Paris in the government or in Washington. It's a Yom Ha'atzmaut. The miracle of what's been accomplished is an occasion that we should be all celebrating and realizing our achievements and regardless of our views on the current policies of the government sitting at the moment. So those are some of the highlights for me.
Well, you gave me the highlights for the organization. How about, was there something that was really a lot of exciting for you? First time you met a prime minister, a president, whoever it was, the event standing on I assume you probably stood on the balcony of the hotel where Herzl stood. What was the best one for you?
It's hard to think of what they are as a, you talk about my background in government and politics. So I would say too, running, being the person who administered a Jewish election was kind of for a political junkie, a Jewish political junkie like me was a great thrill in a way, with all its challenges to run a fair and honest and diverse and open election. That was for me a personal highlight to make that happen with all our team and all our organizations. It was a big effort, but to shepherd that, being in Basel was great. Being on the balcony for me, like what they call a goosebump moment, was also being in the shul the day before this past August. It was 125 years today, the same parsha when Herzl went to synagogue in Basel. He wasn't religious in his practice, but he went to the synagogue the day before the Zionist Congress. And we stood there and there was a choir singing the full, cantorial version of the Tfilah L'Shlom HaMedinah, the prayer for the state of Israel. And hearing that and imagining what had transpired, and Europe had been through the Holocaust, and how, could Herzl have imagined that being sung in that shul, that Shabbat, 125 years later, I think gave everyone, a bit of goosebumps to see, how much we've accomplished. There's a lot more to do, but we can be inspired by those moments to move forward.
Now, you had mentioned to me earlier that the way you got involved in politics was you were a student at Ramaz. You interviewed David Dinkins before he was very high up, and somehow you hit it off with him, and you followed him along his path to being mayor of the city of New York. How did you get into the AZM?
So yeah, my career has been in I call it public service and Jewish service. First part of my career was working in government, in public affairs, both in New York City, in Washington, and then I moved to work in the Jewish community professionally for the first time in 1999 at the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee, the JDC, the Joint, the world's largest Jewish humanitarian organization, and I worked on areas of humanitarian aid and relief for Holocaust survivors and Jewish property restitution in Europe. I interacted with many people in the WZO and the Jewish Agency and others that we were all part of the global roundtables discussing those issues. And then, had an opportunity when my predecessor at AZM retired, and there was a search, to move from being an assistant executive VP at the JDC to being in the executive director's seat at AZM. But it fit in perfectly with my passion for Israel, with my background. My father, was just 20th yard site last week, and I spoke at a lecture and said, if there was a definition of a Brenta Zionist, a devout Zionist, it was Rabbi Irving Block. He was in Israel in 47, 48 in the Haganah. He was there actually outside the Sochnut in those pictures, everyone dancing on the night of Kaftet November when the partition vote happened. So it's he's buried on Har Hazeitim. So being a Zionist, passion for Israel has been a part of my life forever, since I was born. And so when an opportunity came professionally to help lead the AZM from the professional standpoint, it was something that I was eager to pursue, and I'm happy I was selected and have been here almost 6 years, and helping to grow the organization. We began with 20. There were 25 organizations when I started. With the work with our lay leaders, we've now expanded to 41 groups. So the Zionist movement's on the rise, and I'm happy to be part of it.
No, you've accomplished amazing things. AZM is one of the pieces of the alphabet soup that has risen to the top in recent years. You get tremendous credit, and some people are very envious of all the accomplishments you've done, where some other organizations have not been able to do it the same way, which I guess is a credit both to your talents and also your experience in politics, because Jewish politics is probably more complicated than City Hall politics in New York.
New York City Hall, New York City is very diverse, and it was working at City Hall and being exposed to the diversity of the national Jewish organizations and the local Jewish organizations, many of whom connections I have now and people I work with that I developed 30 years ago was critical. But also, we have a great support. You come from the RZA, Religious Zionists of America Mizrahi, which was one of the founding organizations when what was called the American Zionist Emergency Council. Our original iteration began with 4 organizations, so it's a collective work of many groups that were there from over the years, helping build this movement.
And next steps, if you had to look past the next Zionist Congress, which is coming up, what is the big project AZM is working on?
So our big project for this year, and I'll do a little promotion, tell everyone you could look at our website at azm.org about AZM and our member organizations, but also we have a project we're working on together with the Conference of Presidents for Israel's 75th anniversary, encouraging celebrations of that event. That's our big project for this year. www.israel75usa.org. Israel75usa.org will also take you to a site now on the AZM page, soon to be an independent website with a lot of resources, materials, calendar, things that people can use to celebrate Israel's 75th anniversary. So in the year 2023, that's our big project to promote and celebrate Israel's 75 years of amazing accomplishments and how that can drive us to the future. And we'll be tying that in with the Zionist Congress. So that's our big anniversary, and we'll hope that people understand through those celebrations what Zionism is, that what Israel is in a positive way, and help us move forward.
Yeah, no, again, in terms of AZM's work and all of the different organizations, my assumption is because AZM jumped to the lead with the Conference of Presidents and creating these events, that there will be more events than there have been probably since much earlier times in the American Jewish community.
And we're also, this anniversary presents us with opportunities that didn't exist for the 50th anniversary of Israel. There's social media, there's technology, there's the internet in a way that didn't exist for prior celebrations of Israel. So there's an opportunity to engage more people, to spread the word through technology, through social mediums and others that get more people engaged both physically at events and online as well.
So we're running out of time, believe it or not, Herb. This has gone very quickly for me. If I'm to understand, then next steps are you're going to continue doing what you're doing, growing the organization, and in addition to it, bringing people pride that they're part of something bigger, of this Zionist movement. We've had our accomplishments, but there's still something more to do. You're in the lead.
Exactly as you've said it, it's hard to follow a rabbi in your articulating of what you just said, but that's exactly what we're doing. Our slogan has been Zionism Forward. Zionism is a movement that is built on our strength in the past and what we've accomplished, but has a lot still to do to engage American Jewry, world Jewry with Israel, and move forward on the principles that Herzl defined and that we still believe in.
So Herb, on that note, I thank you for your time. I appreciate all that you do. It's been a pleasure to know you and to watch what you've accomplished. And may you continue to accomplish great things in this upcoming 75th year and for the years afterwards as well. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you for inviting me and for your partnership with us.
Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.